The conference room was sterile white. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. My security badge sat in the center of the table between us. Effective immediately, your clearance is revoked. Strategy Officer Lydia Hartwell slid the termination papers across the polished surface. Her manicured nails were the color of dried blood. 12 years. 12 years I'd run classified avionics weapons intelligence for the Department of Defense, and this woman who'd been in her position for 8 months thought she could just erase me. "You're making a catastrophic mistake," I said. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. "The decision is final, Montgomery." She didn't even look up from her tablet. "Your refusal to implement the Athena protocol shows a lack of vision. We're moving toward automation. You're a relic." Athena, the automated tactical high-level engagement and navigation algorithm, an untested piece of software that would control every radar satellite array in our network. Thousands of eyes in the sky. Our entire early warning system, and they wanted to hand it over to code that had never faced a real-world scenario. I leaned forward. "That algorithm has vulnerabilities. I documented 17 critical flaws in the last security assessment alone. You put Athena in control, and we're blind the moment someone exploits them. Your concerns have been noted and dismissed." Lydia finally met my eyes. She was smiling, actually smiling. "My staff assures me the system is revolutionary. We'll have faster response times, eliminate human error, and reduce personnel costs by 40%. Your hesitation is the only obstacle." That's when I made the decision. I reached into my jacket pocket. Lydia's hand moved toward the phone, but I was only pulling out a data card. The small black chip caught the light as I slid it across the table. "What is that?" Her smile faltered. "My authorization codes, master access to every avionics system in the network." I stood up. "I'm transferring them to you since you're so confident in your staff's abilities." She picked up the chip like it might burn her. "You can't just—" "I can. I am. You have 10 minutes before the lockout system codes engage. The entire network will freeze until proper authentication is restored." I collected my personal tablet from the table. "Your team is brilliant, right? They should have no problem recoding the hub." The color drained from her face. "You're bluffing? Check your emergency alerts in about 30 seconds. I walked to the door. My hand was on the handle when the first alarm started screaming through the building. Then another. Then 6 more in rapid succession. Lydia was on her feet, shouting at someone on her phone. But I was already gone. Before we go further into what happened next, if you're finding this story compelling, consider subscribing. No pressure, but we're working toward reaching 5,000 subscribers, and your support means these stories keep getting told. The subscribe button is right there whenever you're ready. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. My name is Cressida Montgomery. For 12 years, I held the position of Senior Intelligence Officer for Avionics Weapons Systems at the Department of Defense. That's the official title. What it actually meant was that I was responsible for every piece of intelligence flowing through our airborne weapons networks. Satellites, drones, early warning systems, tactical response protocols. If it flew and carried a weapon, it went through my desk first. People assume someone in my position came from military royalty or political connections. They're wrong. I grew up in a town of 3,000 people in rural Pennsylvania. My father was a mechanic. My mother taught elementary school. We weren't poor, but we knew what it meant to work for everything we had. My dad used to say that being raised without excess teaches you something money can't buy, the ability to see people for who they are, not what they have. That stuck with me. Even when I was briefing generals and senators, I never forgot that every decision I made affected real people. The airman monitoring a radar screen at 3 in the morning. The analyst trying to determine if a blip on satellite imagery was a threat or a flock of birds. The families who trusted that someone like me was doing everything possible to keep them safe. Empathy isn't weakness. In my line of work, it's survival. You have to understand how people think, allies and enemies alike, to stay ahead of threats. You have to remember that behind every data point is a human life. That's why I couldn't let Athena go live. Not because I was afraid of change or threatened by automation. Because I understood what failure would cost, and I wasn't willing to gamble with those stakes. The Athena protocol first crossed my desk 6 months before I was fired. It arrived in a classified briefing folder, marked with enough security warnings to give a lower-level analyst a heart attack. I poured my third coffee of the morning and settled in to read. On paper, it was impressive. The development team had created an algorithm capable of processing threat data from multiple satellite arrays simultaneously, cross-referencing intelligence databases, and initiating defensive protocols without human intervention. Response time would drop from minutes to seconds. In theory, it was the future of national security. I spent 3 days reviewing the technical specifications. Then I called my team together. My primary analyst was a woman named Olivia Reeves. She'd worked under me for 7 years and had a mind like a steel trap for system vulnerabilities. If there was a way to break something, Olivia would find it. "What am I looking at?" she asked, scrolling through the Athena files on her secure terminal. "The brass wants to implement this across the entire avionics network, full automation by the end of the fiscal year." Olivia's eyes went wide. "The entire network? That's every early warning satellite we have." "That's what I said. And they want to run it all through a single algorithm?" She kept reading, her expression growing more concerned with each page. "Cressida, this is insane. There's no redundancy protocol. If Athena crashes, everything crashes." "Keep digging. I need a full threat assessment by Monday." What Olivia found was worse than I'd feared. The Athena code was elegant, sophisticated, and fatally flawed. The development team had been so focused on speed and efficiency that they'd cut corners on security. The system had vulnerabilities that even a moderately skilled hacker could exploit. Worse, the algorithm's decision-making protocols were based on predictive models that had never been tested against real-world adversarial tactics. I documented everything in a 40-page security assessment. Every flaw, every risk, every scenario where Athena could fail catastrophically. Then I submitted it through proper channels and waited. The response came from Lydia Hartwell's office. "Your concerns are noted, but the implementation timeline remains unchanged. Please prepare your team for the transition." I read that email 5 times, certain I'd misunderstood. They were just ignoring the assessment. 12 years of service, a pristine record, and they thought I was filing concerns for fun. I picked up the phone and called Lydia's office directly. "Montgomery, I'm in meetings all day," she said when she finally answered. "Then make time. We need to discuss the Athena vulnerabilities." "There's nothing to discuss. The development team reviewed your assessment and found it overly cautious. We're moving forward." Overly cautious? I felt my jaw tighten. Did they address the authentication bypass vulnerability, or the fact that the predictive model assumes adversaries will behave rationally? Or that there's no manual override if the system makes an incorrect threat assessment? "Cressida." Her tone shifted to something that might have been sympathy if it wasn't so condescending. "I understand change is difficult, especially for someone who's been doing things the same way for over a decade. But warfare is evolving. We need to evolve with it. This isn't about resistance to change. This is about basic security protocol. Your opinion is noted. The decision stands." She hung up. I sat in my office for a long time after that call, staring at the commendations on my wall. Certificates of achievement. Letters of appreciation from 3 different defense secretaries. A photo of me shaking hands with the president after a successful operation that had prevented a major international incident. None of it mattered anymore. I tried going over Lydia's head. My direct superior was Rear Admiral Thomas Whitaker, a career Navy man who'd been overseeing defense intelligence operations since before I joined the department. We'd worked together for 8 years. He knew my record. He trusted my judgment. "Tom, I need 15 minutes of your time," I said, standing in his office doorway at 6 in the morning. I knew he got in early to avoid the bureaucratic circus that started after 8. He waved me in, not looking up from the briefing papers scattered across his desk. "This about Athena? You've heard. Hartwell sent me your assessment. Also sent me her team's rebuttal." He finally looked at me. "They make some compelling points about operational efficiency. They're wrong about the security risks." "Are they? Or are you being protective of your department's autonomy?" That stung. "You really think I'd file a 40-page assessment to protect turf?" Thomas leaned back in his chair. "No. I think you're brilliant at your job, and you're genuinely concerned. but I also think you might be overestimating the risks. Technology advances, Cressida. Sometimes we have to take calculated risks to stay ahead. This isn't calculated. They haven't even run Athena against a proper adversarial simulation. They're testing it in controlled environments and calling it ready. The development team disagrees. The development team is on contract with Hartwell's office. They're not going to admit their product is flawed when their next payment depends on successful implementation. Thomas picked up a pen, tapping it against his desk. What do you want me to do? Delay the implementation. Give me 3 months to run proper field tests. Real scenarios. If Athena passes, I'll personally oversee the transition. And if I can't delay it, then you're putting every early warning system we have at risk to meet a budget timeline. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between us, filled with the low hum of the building's ventilation system. I'll see what I can do, he finally said. I should have known that was the best I'd get. 2 days later, Thomas called me back to his office. His expression told me everything before he said a word. I went to bat for you, requested a 3-month delay for additional testing. He slid a printed email across his desk. The deputy secretary's office denied it. Athena implementation begins in 6 weeks. I read the email, official letterhead, formal language, the bureaucratic equivalent of a door slamming in my face. They didn't even consider it. There's pressure from above. Congressional oversight committees want to see modernization. The secretary promised results. Hartwell's making those results happen. Thomas looked tired. I'm sorry, Cressida. I tried. What if I refuse to cooperate with the implementation? His expression hardened. Then you'll be removed from your position and someone who will cooperate will take your place. The machine is moving. You can work with it or get crushed by it. I left his office knowing my options had just run out. The next 4 weeks were surreal. I watched as Lydia Hartwell's team began preparing for Athena's integration into the avionics network. They brought in contractors, held optimization meetings, distributed glossy presentations about the future of automated defense systems. Everyone was excited. Everyone except the people who actually understood how the systems worked. Olivia cornered me in the hallway outside a briefing room. They're not listening to any of our security protocols, she said, her voice low and urgent. I tried explaining the authentication vulnerabilities to one of Hartwell's technical leads, and he told me the algorithm was self-correcting. Self-correcting? Like that's a magic word that makes the problems disappear. They don't want to hear problems. They want to hear success. So what do we do? I didn't have an answer for her. That night, I went home to my small apartment in Alexandria and sat on my balcony with a glass of wine I didn't drink. The Potomac stretched out below, dark and endless. Somewhere across that river, decisions were being made by people who didn't understand the consequences. People who measured success in budget allocations and congressional approval ratings instead of lives protected. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. Haven't heard from you in a while, everything okay? I stared at that message for a long time. How could I explain what was happening? That I'd spent 12 years building something meaningful, and it was being dismantled by people who thought innovation meant cutting corners. Just work stuff. I'll call this weekend. I didn't call that weekend. I was too busy preparing for the inevitable. The implementation date arrived like an execution. Athena was scheduled to take control of the Eastern satellite array at 0600 hours. If the test was successful, full network integration would follow within 72 hours. I arrived at the operations center at 4 in the morning. The room was already buzzing with activity. Technicians at their stations. Lydia Hartwell holding court near the main display, surrounded by her team and several contractors I didn't recognize. She saw me and smiled that predatory smile. Montgomery. Didn't expect to see you here. This is still my department until the transition is complete. Of course. She turned back to her team, dismissing me. I took my station at the back of the room, watching the main display. The satellite array positions glowed in soft blue across a map of the eastern seaboard and Atlantic. Each point represented billions of dollars of technology and years of strategic positioning. At 0550 hours, the lead technician began the countdown. All systems nominal, Athena initialization in 10 minutes. The room quieted. Everyone was watching the screens. Olivia slipped into the chair next to mine. "This is going to be a disaster," she whispered. "Maybe we're wrong. Maybe it'll work perfectly and we'll feel foolish for worrying." She gave me a look that said she knew I didn't believe that. 0600 hours. Engaging Athena protocol. The display flickered. The blue points representing satellites shifted from manual control to automated status. Green indicators appeared across the board. "Integration successful," the technician announced. "Athena is now controlling Eastern Array satellite positions and threat assessment protocols." Lydia actually started applauding. Others joined in. Champagne appeared from somewhere. Someone was taking photos for what I assumed would be a press release about innovation and modernization. I watched the data streams on my terminal. Everything looked normal. Response times were fast. Threat assessments were processing smoothly. Maybe I was wrong. Then, at 0643 hours, the first anomaly appeared. It was small, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. A satellite in the array shifted position by 0.03 degrees, within acceptable parameters, but unusual without a manual command. I pulled up the satellite's log. Athena had issued a realignment order based on a perceived threat vector. There was no threat. The algorithm had misidentified a civilian aircraft's flight path as potentially hostile. "Did anyone else see that?" I called out. The room was too loud with celebration. No one was watching the data anymore. I pulled up the threat assessment Athena had generated. The logic was wrong. The algorithm had taken multiple innocent data points, a plane's altitude change, a scheduled satellite pass, and a weather pattern, and connected them into a threat scenario that didn't exist. And it had moved a satellite to respond to it. "Olivia, look at this." She leaned over my terminal, her expression shifting from concern to alarm. "It's creating ghost threats, and repositioning assets to counter them. We need to tell someone." I stood up, raising my voice over the celebration. "We have a problem." No one heard me, or they ignored me. I walked directly to Lydia's group. "We need to disengage Athena. Now." She turned, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. "Excuse me? The algorithm is generating false threat assessments and repositioning satellites based on faulty logic. We need to shut it down before everything is functioning perfectly, Montgomery." She gestured to the main display, where all the indicators still showed green. "You're seeing problems that don't exist because you can't accept that your way isn't the only way. Look at the satellite logs. Athena just moved S-Aminus 447 based on a threat that isn't real. Predictive repositioning is part of the algorithm's efficiency. It anticipates threats before they develop. It's not anticipating, it's hallucinating threats out of normal data." The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching us now. Lydia set down her champagne glass. "You've made your opposition to this project clear from the beginning. I've been patient with your concerns, but this is becoming insubordination. This is me trying to prevent a catastrophic system failure. Then, it's a good thing you won't be in a position to interfere much longer." She said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "Report to conference room 7. Security is waiting to escort you." That's how I ended up in that sterile conference room with my badge on the table between us. But you already know that part. What you don't know is what I'd prepared for this exact scenario. 3 weeks earlier, when I realized no one was going to listen to reason, I'd built a failsafe. A security protocol embedded so deep in the avionics network architecture that even I would need 12 hours to fully extract it. It was elegant, completely legal within my authority as senior intelligence officer, and absolutely devastating if triggered. The lockout system was designed for worst-case scenarios: foreign infiltration of our networks, catastrophic system compromise, situations where the only safe option was to freeze everything until proper authentication could be restored. I'd modified it slightly. Instead of requiring a 2-person authorization and a direct order from the Secretary of Defense, my version required master access codes that only I possessed. And I'd set it on a timer. The data card I gave Lydia wasn't actually my authorization codes. It was a physical key that armed the system. The moment she touched it, the countdown began. 10 minutes. That's how long her brilliant staff had to figure out how to prevent the entire avionics weapons intelligence network from locking itself down. I was 3 blocks from the Pentagon when my phone started ringing. "Thomas," I answered. "Admiral, what the hell did you do?" he was shouting. I'd never heard Thomas shout before. Every system in the network is showing critical security warnings. We can't access satellite controls, threat databases, nothing. And the error message says it requires your authentication to restore. I triggered the lockout protocol. You what? It's within my authority as Senior Intelligence Officer. When I identify a critical security threat, I'm authorized to implement emergency measures. Athena passed all its initial tests. There is no security threat. Athena is the security threat, Tom. The algorithm is unstable. It's generating false threat assessments and moving satellites to respond to threats that don't exist. I documented it before I left the operations center. Check the logs for satellite S-447 at 0643 hours. I heard him shouting at someone to pull the logs. Silence while he waited. Then his voice came back, quieter but harder. There's a notation about predictive repositioning. Hartwell's team says it's functioning as designed. Then her team doesn't understand the difference between prediction and hallucination. Run a full diagnostic on Athena's decision-making protocols. Actually test them against real adversarial scenarios. If I'm wrong, I'll unlock the system and submit my resignation. You'll submit your resignation either way. You just locked down our entire early warning network. For 12 hours, that's how long it takes to fully restore access even with the master codes. Use that time to do the testing that should have been done months ago. More silence. Then, where are you? That's not relevant. Cressida, Defense Intelligence is getting involved. They're treating this as a potential security breach. If you don't cooperate, tell them to check their secure channels in about 5 minutes. They're going to want to talk to me anyway. I hung up. The call from Defense Intelligence came exactly 4 minutes later. Miss Montgomery, this is Agent Nathaniel Cross with DIA. I need you to tell me your current location and what you've done to the avionics network. His voice was calm, professional, the kind of calm that comes from years of interrogating people who don't want to talk. Agent Cross, I'm invoking my authority under Defense Protocol 77 Bravo. I've implemented emergency security measures in response to a critical system vulnerability. All documentation has been forwarded to your office. I have your documentation. I also have reports that you were terminated from your position approximately 30 minutes ago. Your authority to invoke any protocols ended with your termination. That made me pause. I'd been so focused on the lockout that I hadn't considered that particular legal wrinkle. Check the timestamps, I said. I triggered the lockout protocol before I was officially terminated. The termination paperwork wasn't processed until after the system lockdown initiated. That's a technicality. That's the law. I had authority when I acted. Whether I have it now is irrelevant to the validity of the action. I heard typing on his end. Someone was checking my timeline. Even if that's true, Cross said, you've effectively crippled our early warning capabilities. Do you understand the security implications of that? The security implications of running an untested, vulnerable algorithm through our entire network are far worse. I've given you 12 hours to conduct proper testing. Use them. Miss Montgomery, Agent Cross, I need you to do something for me. Pull up the Athena source code. Look at Module 7-33, the threat correlation matrix. Tell me what you see. More typing, a long pause. I'm not a software engineer. You don't need to be. Do you see the confidence threshold for threat identification? I see a value of 0.65. That means Athena will classify something as a threat if it's only 65% confident. In other words, it's wrong more than one time in 3. That seems low. It's catastrophic. The development team set it that low to reduce false negatives, but they created a system that generates constant false positives instead. Give me your email. I'll send you a simulation I ran last week. This isn't protocol. Nothing about this situation is protocol. Email, now. He gave it to me. I forwarded him the file from my personal secure server. What am I looking at? He asked after a minute. A simulation of Athena responding to a commercial satellite launch. Watch what it does. I waited while he viewed the results. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It classified the launch as an ICBM threat and initiated defensive protocols that would have started an international incident. That simulation took me 4 hours to run. Your team has 12. I suggest you use them wisely. If you're wrong about this, then I've ended my career for nothing and I'll accept the consequences. But if I'm right, and you ignore this, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have prevented whatever catastrophe Athena causes. I hung up before he could respond. The next 12 hours were the longest of my life. I went to a coffee shop in Georgetown, somewhere public enough that I wouldn't be quietly disappeared, private enough that I could work. My laptop connected to a VPN that routed through enough servers to make tracking difficult. I monitored the situation through secure channels I probably wasn't supposed to still have access to. The network was in chaos. Lydia's team was trying everything to break the lockout. They brought in contractors, called in favors from NSA, even tried brute forcing the authentication protocols. Nothing worked. I'd built the system too well. Meanwhile, Defense Intelligence was doing exactly what I'd hoped. Agent Cross had escalated my simulation to his superiors. They were running their own tests on Athena. And from what I could see in the secure traffic, they were finding everything I'd warned about. At hour 7, Olivia sent me an encrypted message. DIA just shut down the Athena implementation. Hartwell is losing her mind. They're talking about a full investigation into the development contracts. I allowed myself a small smile. At hour 9, Thomas called. You were right. Those 3 words were all he said. Then he hung up. At hour 11, I received an official communication from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Miss Montgomery, your presence is requested at the Pentagon at 0900 hours tomorrow for a full briefing on the events of the past 24 hours. Failure to appear will result in immediate legal action. I finished my coffee and went home. The briefing room was packed. Admiral Thomas Whitaker, Agent Nathaniel Cross, and 3 other DIA officials. Someone from the Inspector General's office. 2 Pentagon lawyers. And, looking significantly less confident than the last time I'd seen her, Lydia Hartwell, I sat at the head of the table in the only empty chair. The Secretary of Defense's representative, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Frost, opened a folder. Miss Montgomery, let's be very clear about the situation. Your actions yesterday violated approximately a dozen protocols, created a national security incident, and should probably result in criminal charges. She paused. However, your actions also prevented what our analysis suggests would have been a catastrophic failure of our early warning systems. So before we discuss consequences, I want to understand exactly what happened and why. I spent the next hour walking them through everything. The Athena vulnerabilities I'd identified, the security assessment that was ignored, my failed attempts to delay implementation through proper channels, the false threat generation I'd witnessed during the initial test, and finally, the decision to trigger the lockout protocol. When I finished, Catherine looked at Lydia. Strategy Officer Hartwell, you reviewed Miss Montgomery's initial security assessment. Why was it dismissed? Lydia sat up straighter. The development team assured me the concerns were overstated. We had pressure from congressional oversight to show progress on modernization initiatives. Athena represented significant advancement in. The development team was on contract with your office, I interrupted. They had a financial incentive to dismiss concerns. That's not. It's literally in the contract terms. Final payment was contingent on successful implementation. Catherine made a note. We'll be reviewing those contracts thoroughly. Agent Cross, what did your testing reveal? Cross opened his own folder. Athena has 17 critical vulnerabilities, exactly as Miss Montgomery documented. Additionally, the threat correlation matrix is fundamentally flawed. In simulated scenarios, the algorithm generated false positive threat assessments in 38% of cases. Implementation of this system would have resulted in, at best, constant false alarms. At worst, automated defensive responses to threats that didn't exist. Which could have started a war, Catherine said quietly. Yes, ma'am. She turned to Admiral Whitaker. Admiral, you were Miss Montgomery's direct superior. Why weren't her concerns escalated more aggressively? Thomas looked older than I'd ever seen him. I trusted the chain of command. Strategy Officer Hartwell had approval from the Deputy Secretary's office. I assumed the decision to proceed had been properly vetted at higher levels. It wasn't, Catherine said. The Deputy Secretary signed off based on Hartwell's briefing, which apparently didn't include the security assessment. This was a failure at multiple levels. She closed her folder and looked at me. "Miss Montgomery, you're still facing consequences for your methods, but given the circumstances, those consequences will be significantly less severe than they might have been." I understand. However, there's another matter to discuss. The Avionics Weapons Intelligence Department needs leadership. Someone who understands the systems, prioritizes security over political expediency, and has the spine to push back when necessary. She glanced at the others in the room. "Unless there are objections, I'm recommending Miss Montgomery be reinstated to her position, effective immediately." Lydia actually gasped. "You can't be serious. She sabotaged. She prevented a catastrophic failure that would have occurred on your watch, Strategy Officer Hartwell. Speaking of which, you're being transferred to a position where your particular talents will be better utilized, somewhere far from operational systems." Catherine stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Miss Montgomery, I'll expect you back at your desk tomorrow morning. We have a lot of work to do rebuilding what was nearly broken." That was 6 months ago. The investigation into the Athena contracts revealed exactly what I'd suspected. Corners cut, testing fabricated, security concerns buried under pressure to show results and secure funding. 3 contractors lost their Defense Department credentials. Lydia Hartwell was reassigned to a policy research position where she analyzes historical data and has zero authority over active systems. The Athena program was scrapped entirely. The development team is being sued for breach of contract. As for me, I'm back at my desk. Same office, same view of the Potomac, same responsibility for systems that keep people safe. But some things have changed. I have direct access to the Secretary of Defense's office now. When I raise security concerns, they're not dismissed or buried. They're investigated thoroughly before any implementation moves forward. It took nearly destroying our entire early warning network, but the lesson was finally learned. We're developing new protocols now, automation with proper safeguards, innovation that doesn't sacrifice security. It's slower than what Lydia wanted, more expensive, more complicated. But it works, and when it's deployed, I'll sleep soundly knowing we did it right. Olivia was promoted to Deputy Intelligence Officer. She sits in the office next to mine, and together we're building something that balances advancement with responsibility. Technology that serves people instead of replacing them. My father called a few weeks after everything settled down. He'd seen something in the news about modernization challenges at the Pentagon and asked if that had anything to do with my work stress. "Something like that," I told him. "You do the right thing." I did what I had to do. Then that's all that matters. It's not that simple, of course. Nothing in this world ever is. But sitting in my office, watching data streams from satellites that are under proper human oversight, protected by systems that have been thoroughly tested and vetted, I know I made the right call. 12 years of experience. 12 years of understanding that behind every data point is a human life. That's not something you can program into an algorithm. That's not something you can automate. That's judgment, hard-won, carefully applied, absolutely essential judgment. And no matter how advanced technology becomes, there will always be moments when human judgment is the only thing standing between safety and catastrophe. The day I triggered that lockout protocol, I ended my career as it existed, but I also started something new, something better. A system where security comes first, where concerns are heard, where 12 years of experience and a 40-page assessment mean more than budget timelines and congressional pressure. That's worth fighting for. That's worth the risk I took. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the importance of standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything, I'd appreciate your subscription. We're working toward 5,000 subscribers, and your support helps create more content about the real stories behind the headlines. The ones about people who chose principle over convenience, integrity over advancement. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.